Madam President, we have here a picture of Jerry Brown, Geraldine Joy Brown, aged 89, who passed away peacefully on Wednesday, January 8th, 2020, at the Hot Springs County Memorial Hospital in Thermopolis, Wyoming. She was surrounded by her loving family. Now, for many years, Jerry was a dominant force in Wyoming. For the last 12 years, she was the single most influential voice with the Wyoming Senate delegation. She's my wife, Bobby's mom. Yet Senator Enzi knew her long before I did. Senator Enzi.
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. I got to meet this delightful lady in Thermopolis, Wyoming, some 70 years ago. I need to tell you a little bit about Thermopolis, Wyoming, and how I wound up there. My dad, during the war, was a welder on ships. And after the war, he moved around the country doing different welding projects, one of which took him to Thermopolis, Wyoming. He welded on a dam there. Dams in the West are used to control floods, but they're big projects and they have a huge impact on communities. This particular one not only controlled floods, but it turned it into a great fishery. But my folks went to Thermopolis, Wyoming, and they also built a trailer park. It was the first modern trailer park in Thermopolis. By modern, I mean there was a central building that had indoor showers and flush toilets. You need to understand a little bit about Wyoming. We're small. At that time, there were 2 cities in Wyoming. To be a city, you have to have more than 3,000 population. But as soon as you have 3,000 population, you can declare yourself a first-class city. Well, in those early days, Casper, the energy capital at that time, and Cheyenne, the state capital at that time, exceeded the 3,000. Now, what effect did that have on the communities? Well, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, and the Congregationalists got together and divided up the towns that were small, realizing that they couldn't support all 3 churches. And there was one town that was so small that they actually got together and formed a community church. Now, what's community church? That's where these 3 denominations work together, and at one time there'll be a Presbyterian minister that's there, and 2 years later there'll be a Methodist minister that's there, and 2 years later a Congregational minister that's there. That's where Jerry Brown was the Sunday school teacher, and that's how I came to meet her. Now, one of the big realizations, because of this community church thing, and the changing of the pastors every 2 years, is I thought that every 2 years the Lord's Prayer changed. But she helped me to understand through that dilemma. So that's where I got to meet Mrs. Brown, and she was a Sunday school teacher, and I wound up in her Sunday school class, and she taught the kindergarten class. Now, when we first started, she actually moved up a couple of times with me as the classes got combined and as I got older. But at that very first one, for Bible school, we held it outdoors underneath a pine tree, huge pine tree. And I can still remember sitting there enthralled with her descriptions as I held my New Testament, which, of course, since I was in kindergarten, I couldn't read, but she filled in for that and gave me a great background. Later, of course, I ran into a book by Robert Fulghum. It was All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And for me, it was kindergarten Sunday school. And my teacher, of course, that was my first Sunday school teacher, and it was my last living Sunday school teacher. And Some of the things that she taught are share everything, play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours, say you're sorry if you hurt someone, and be aware of wonder. And wonder is that if you put some seeds, and we did this, in a paper cup with dirt, and you water it, the plant goes up and the roots go down. Now, some people would say nobody knows why or how, but Mrs. Brown said, that's not true. God has a plan. He knows you. He watches out for you. If you see things going wrong, check your direction, because it might not be where God wants you. All of this was a good basis for my life. I've always appreciated seeing her through the years. Particularly when we visit that church again, which is still a community church, although most of the towns have split those up into more than one denomination. But I've got to say, if the criteria is 3,000 people, by the time the town gets to a first-class city size, the one church is so well established that it's hard for another one to actually get established in a small community like that. But as long as there are wonderful people like Mrs. Brown teaching kindergarten and first grade and second grade and other kids in small communities, this country will be a great place. And I thank her for all the background that she gave me, and ask for your prayers for her family. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, Senator Enzi. You know, she was born May 29th, 1930 in Casper, Wyoming. She was the youngest of 8 children. It was the Dodge family. And Senator Enzi, you talked about building the dam, Thermopolis area. The family lived in Alcova during the construction of the dams and the reservoirs in that area before moving to Thermopolis, where the family owned and ran the Wigwam Bakery. Best bread and anything on donuts you could ever imagine. She worked a number of places, certainly the family bakery, but also she worked at the First National Bank. And Jerry always volunteered to take the mail from the bank to the post office because she had caught the eye of a young postal employee, Bob Brown. The two were married September 18th in 1949, and as you know, they recently celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary. As newlyweds, Bob was sent to Korea. He had been in World War II, was sent with a whole group from the Basin area of Wyoming as part of the National Guard to Korea. They first went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and Jerry followed him. And to pay her way, she had to pick filbert nuts, and she was telling me at Christmas the size of the bag that they had to fill with these filbert nuts before you got any pay. Well, it was a full day's work, and so the lessons that she taught you about hard work, she knew it personally. She was a hard worker. She worked at the bakery. She also worked for Dr. Nels Vicklin's pharmacy in Hot Springs County. She worked at the Hot Springs County Treasurer's Office. But her great joy was when she owned and operated her own store in downtown Thermopolis called Country Charm. She was, as you know, dedicated to her children, to Bobby and to Mike, adored her granddaughter, Hadley. And she taught them to work hard, to be kind, and to always do their best. She was a talented crafter. She enjoyed playing bridge, and she was a collector. Now, she collected Santa Clauses. She collected chickens and pictures of chickens, and she collected rocks from around the world. No matter where I went, I needed to bring back a rock for Jerry. She also, as you know, collected friends and collected memories. She had an encyclopedic memory of Wyoming names, Wyoming places, Wyoming relationships, who was married to who, whose cousin was whom. She rarely left anywhere without a hug, and really loved being everyone's favorite Aunt Jerry. She was also an avid reader and an NBA fan of all things. You know, she loved God, loved America, loved our flag, a longtime member of the Community Federated Church and the Order of the Eastern Star, and as we were talking about in the cloakroom, she was state president of PEO. Jerry Brown has dedicated her life to her family, to her faith, and to her friends. She was committed to her church and her community. She had a well-deserved reputation for being a joiner, a goer, a doer. We will celebrate her life on Saturday, January 18th in Thermopolis at the Community Federated Church, and we miss her dearly. May she rest in peace. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.